Good morning from Port St. Lucie. This is Professor Tefero for Chapter 10 of the Chinese History Overview. And today's lesson is going to be the first president of the CCP, Mao Zedong, who lasted from 1949 to 1967, 68, roughly around that time period, until the visit by Richard Nixon and his demise shortly after that visit, after China was opened up to the West at the instigation, more than likely, from Deng Xiaoping, the person who would succeed Mao Zedong immediately after his impending death. In any event, let's look at Mao Zedong and his career. Mao Zedong was a teacher. He's a history teacher, a high school history teacher, and we make trouble for everyone. I'm a high school history teacher, and I make trouble for everyone. So I can understand where Mao was coming from. In any event, he tried to do the right thing. He tried to be a good boy, but events overwhelmed his existence. He was a teacher, and then, out of necessity, he became a general in the CCP. Now, Mao's military expertise, to say the very least, was limited, and he was not that good a military leader. Neither was Deng Xiaoping, for that matter. They were excellent at other policies. Mao was an excellent organizer, and he was very good at public relations and propaganda. And Deng Xiaoping was excellent with economics and figuring out how can we make money to survive. And both of them had their advantages and disadvantages. But Mao gained the imagination of the CCP leadership, and he became the bona fide leader of the Communist Party in China by 1949, at the end of the Chinese Civil War, which was won by the CCP over the KMT. As Mao entered Beijing, everybody was very, very excited. A new era in China had begun. The working people and the middle class and the countryside people would now be represented in the government, whereas before, people in the countryside sort of were left out by the KMT, and the poorer people in the cities were also left out by the KMT. So we had a new regime, and the new regime at first was very, very good for the poor people. First of all, they gave women equal rights. Now, giving women equal rights is very dangerous. No, giving women equal rights was a very smart thing for Mao to do, because it gained him the support of half the population of China. I mean, what woman wouldn't support somebody who was giving them equal rights? So this was very clever on Mao's part. And like I said, he was very good with publicity and very good with PR. He understood how to do social networking before it became fashionable. In any event, Mao gained a great deal of assistance from the women of China. He made them equals in every possible way. And they were able to establish price controls for food, shelter, and clothing, which means everybody could eat. But then Mao took a bit of a left turn and went into Marxist socialism and said, okay, let's have communes. Now, communes are fine when you want to feed everybody and house everybody, food, shelter, and clothing, the basics of life. But as soon as people get past the phase of getting food, shelter, and clothing, they always want more. I mean, it's just human nature to want more. And Chinese families, in particular, looked out for their families first, and then they looked out for the CCP. And that's only natural as well. So, the commune system did not fit in well with those two principles, making more money and putting your family first. So eventually the commune system failed, and it had to be eliminated from the Chinese characteristics of communism. This eventually led to the mid-50s change to a minor concession to private property, small businesses, mom and pop stores. But the primary thrust of the Chinese Communist Party in the 50s was to put the country first, put the CCP first, and to put Marxist-Leninist thought first. And you and your family came second. That went down fairly well with a society that was trained in Neo-Confucianism, which is another way of saying obedience to the state. They've had 3,000 years of obedience to the state, so they're quite used to having a very strong leader requiring obedience to the state. This is really nothing new. Mao's a dictator, blah, blah, blah. Hey, China had dictators for 3,000 years. I mean, give me a break. This was no new great thing. This was just a continuation of Chinese history and a continuation of strong central leadership by a dictatorial personality. Where Mao went bad was when he started to try and produce steel, overproduce steel. Everybody was producing steel. Everybody in little neighborhood towns were trying to produce steel. Really bad idea. It was probably a better idea to produce food than to produce steel, but at the time it seemed like a good idea. So unfortunately, millions of people starved as a result of this, and that put a strike against Mao's long term in office. But the last nail in the coffin for Mao Zedong was the Cultural Revolution, because by this time he was losing power within the CCP, and the only way that he figured that he could get it back was to get it back with the young people. And he was successful once again as a brilliant PR man and a brilliant propagandist. And he was successful in his propaganda campaign with all the colleges and universities and the young people, and the Little Red Book campaign and the sayings of Mao and swimming across the river. Look at me, I'm still 25. And he got away with it. And all of the college students in China revolted at the same time, and that was the Cultural Revolution. Now, some people might think that it's a great idea to have college people running the show and being in charge of the country. And the older Chinese said, well, we've had colonialists in charge of the country, we've had bad emperors in charge of the country. Why not give our kids a chance? Give the college kids a chance. Let's see how they can run the country. And unfortunately, that just didn't work out, because when you put college seniors, for the most part, in charge of major hospitals and have them perform operations while they're reading a book, that's generally going to lead to the death of the person being operated on, and that would happen like thousands and thousands of times over again. Millions of undiagnosed diseases, millions of deaths due to undiagnosed diseases because college freshmen and sophomores were in charge of entire medical departments. That's not going to work. Also, if you could put these people in charge of transportation, they don't know anything about transportation. If you put them in charge of finance, they don't know anything about finance. They're interns. This is like putting an intern in charge of General Motors or an intern in charge of Microsoft. It's not going to work. You're going to have a disaster on your hand of major proportions, which precisely was what the Cultural Revolution was, a disaster of major proportions. Tens of millions of people either died from these situations or starvation, and of course the students were blamed, but they weren't really at fault here, but they were blamed anyway, and they were sent down. Being sent down means you were removed from your hometown and sent out into the countryside to help the people in the countryside. It's an interesting internship, but it's really not a fast track career move as far as making money is concerned. In any event, uh, the Cultural Revolution was a disaster from just about every standpoint you can imagine. And that lasted until 1977 when Mao died, and then Deng Xiaoping gradually brought the country back to its senses because he had a brother thrown out the second story window of a house by college kids in the Cultural Revolution. So he was really against the Cultural Revolution and college kids running anything except college organizations. And he would later take out his hidden vengeance against college students in Tiananmen Square. And people never figured out why Deng Xiaoping went in with the army and crushed Tiananmen Square and the college students. And that was the reason why. The reason why is he had seen what happened with the Cultural Revolution. He wasn't going to let that ever happen again in China, especially not under his watch and what had happened to his brother. That was the hidden agenda for Tiananmen Square. Westerners have absolutely no idea about these particular facts or histories of China. They have no idea about his motivation and why he did things. But if you're a student of sinology, you might be able to understand where his motivation was coming from. In any event, Mao had finally come to his end during the Cultural Revolution, and Deng Xiaoping took over from Mao after his demise, and we will cover the new economic infusion of one party, two systems, which was originated by Deng Xiaoping, utilizing socialism and capitalism in order to make the state of China stronger. We'll look at that in our next episode of Lesson 11. And for today, Lesson 10, I wish you all a happy and healthy night, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.